Hello. Hello, Johnny. Hello, Caprice, tuned in from Great Yarmouth. Just checking the connection. Great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is the 11th Assembly Online event. We started at the start of April. I'd like to introduce you to 4 MA Writing graduates from the Royal College of Art: Esme Bogus, Nina Hand, Rose Hand Dayton, and Harry Welch. They all write about bodies, and that's bodies as human, also the systems and structures around us and within us. The selection of texts they'll be reading all intersect the human with bodies of land and the spaces that we move within. Bodies are networked, hardwired, failing. There's something or somewhere solid upon which we depend, in a perpetual state of flux. From the movements of the tongue through Sappho's rosy-fingered moon to the Millennium Dome, writing the body considers how the shape and frame of their work is at the intersection of textual and visual bodies. Each of the guests tonight will read for around 10 minutes. The words will be accompanied by images or slideshows that they have selected. If you do have any questions or comments, do post them in the chat, and each of the speakers will be back at the end together to discuss in more detail. There's also a couple of other related events happening soon, which we'll tell you about at the end, and post links and information in the chat afterwards. Jonathan's locked in from South Norwich and had sausages for tea. I hope your number 10 is good. So now I'm going to very smoothly pass over to our first speaker, Esme Bogus. Okay, you're up.
So hi, I'm Esme Bogus, and I'm an artist and writer based in London. I'm originally from Southwold in Suffolk, so just down the road from Assembly House, so it's nice to be doing something local. And I just want to say thank you to Henry and Assembly House Online for having us all. I've been watching some of the online programme during lockdown, so it's really nice now to be a part of it. So I recently finished the MA Writing course at the RCA, and I'm going to be reading from my final major project, A Map of the Tongue. I'll be reading a short extract taken from the chapter Tongue, Scottish Highlands, as well as 5 poems, which sit between each one of the 5 chapters. So a bit of background about the project. I set out to explore the tongue in its many forms, to move with its meanings, to allow its slipperiness to guide the way. I began with thinking about my own tongue, my childlike perception of it as a creature living inside my mouth, wondering where it began and ended, my throat, my stomach, my toes, and then quizzically reflecting on how the organ reached beyond its somatic form to become food, language, and sound. Using the mythical tongue map as a model, I visited locations relating to the tongue: Smithfield Market, the Basilica of St Anthony in Padua, the Village of Tongue, Taylor's Bell Foundry in Loughborough, and finally Samuel Johnson's house, meditating on taste, autonomy, geographies, histories, sound, and language as I went. The extract I'm going to read is from the chapter Tongue, Scottish Highlands, and looks at journeys, land, and bodies travelling through spaces. I'm interested in, as Henry described in the intro, the idea of a body failing, how the tongue can slip and stumble, how it can mischievously alter articulation. This became even more apparent when trying to record myself recently, reading for events, which resulted in constant stopping and starting because I couldn't pronounce something correctly or was scrutinising the way I said a particular word. The poems I'm about to read attempt to enact the bodily movements of the tongue, offering chances to slip up with their alliteration, sibilants, and twists. And as you can see, I've included some research images as well. So if anyone has any questions about those at the end, then feel free to ask. So this is the first extract from Tongue, Scottish Highlands. A tongue and a map are placed side by side. The vein in the middle of the tongue is a passage into the rest of the body, leading downwards into dark, fleshy depths. A map's many veins are paths in which bodies have previously moved through, ending up in cities or towns or small villages, perhaps losing their way or arriving with intent. Entrusting a saliva-soaked finger to tell them the direction of the wind. Bodies and land are both ephemeral entities, both habitable yet transient, home and unfamiliar territory. Bodies are held by the ground beneath, organs in turn supported, identities upheld. Geographies shift with tides and cracks in the earth. Separations of once connected pathways, now sheer drops off a cliff edge. What happens when we think of terrain as body or body as terrain, in the process of ascribing it with human attributes? The journey to Tongue took 8 hours in total, a 20-minute walk to the train station, in the dark, zero morning light. Step on, step off, a few changes. Then a plane from Luton Airport, roughly an hour of airtime. One flight crossing a border, through puffed up clouds which I watched ardently as they tore on the wing, like cotton wool being pulled apart. My mother sat next to me, flicking the pages of her book. A few words occasionally voiced over the whir of the engine. A tomato juice picked up and swigged and then returned to the flip-down table in front of her. She'd offered to accompany me on the trip to Tongue, and I willingly accepted. 2 bodies and 2 voices and 2 tongues moving together, journeying together, conversing and then stopping to enjoy the silence. Her mother tongue was Irish. I recited the Gaelic words that she had taught me as a child. Hello and goodbye were all I can remember, all my mouth could muster. She had given me my tongue. So this is the first of the poems which I'm going to read, and this one is called Chew. It was supper time. Meat's hard to chew. Old tendons and muscle and leg. A steak with a jellied line of fat needs some help to suck it up. Tongue rolls itself, hold out straw, lapping up the animal slab through its newly formed empty core. Sweets chew quite well, indents in the mallow or gum, washed over with bubbly spit, making a wet, milky fondant. It makes it go down easier. The bag of spongy teeth-like shapes tastes like watered-down strawberries. That familiar, infuriating churning is fed through an ear. Stop. Make it stop. Raw matter, cooked matter, any matter doesn't matter. It starts as a plate, or a meal, or a platter, but it's all just gunk in the end. Mush or splatters of once whole-crusted pies, big body pies, then crushed by a fork to pattern their edges. Cheeks help. Tongue flattens and rolls the last scrap into the belly like the angry crushing of unwanted paper being thrown into a waste paper bin. Gone. No more. Over. And this poem is called Thrust. He let his teeth grab hold of it as he concentrated and chiselled away at the bricks. The garage could be seen from the dining room window. A fern tree licks its own bark, roots planted, proud yet disguised. Brick in hand, another one, dusty dips of dugout space. Plants along the path are peppered with yellow dots. Wait, no, creatures. No, caterpillars. They wrap their spongy bodies around stems, masking the greenness of freshly unrolled leaves. Bites have been snapped out of them. Negative crimps of leftover crescents the eaters took away to get their fill. The ground was soft. The rain had made it that way. Welly boots plummet into moss-lipped holes. The bricks are shaped to fit between the gaps in the garden wall, slotting them back into cavities to stop another stack from toppling. It's resting on his bottom lip now. Teeth have let loose a little bit. A brick is wedged firmly in place. And this poem is called Roll. A trick, a U-shaped competition. 2 bodies tried to fold it into the middle, trying to make a tube, hopeful curl. It was the end of the day. Exhausted from spitting out answers to questions, long words, short words, constant mutters, stutters. It's still trying. you could be rolling with me. Intense looks at the other body attempting the same thing. Brain fidgets, squints of pupils, must try harder. Annoyed at non-curler, incorrect genes to make it do what the brain wants it to do. Inside of cavity, ups and downs like a flabby terrain, not terrene, no, not terrene. Do it. A sip of hot tea burns it. Burnt roller. Red and pain grows on the sides, too sore to flex and stretch. Unfilled, uncrisp cannoli. No snap, just flattening back to its usual resting place. Pupils soften. Done. No one wins. And this poem is called Lol. Half in, half out. Hashed up flab pushed against cheeks spent too much time against molars. It steals their shape. Crinkled squishy pink, like a scallop edge or wrinkled lettuce. To loll like a horse, a lolling steed. A tongue swaying or drooping or dangling between buck teeth and hot straw. It's summer. The stables are dry from the heat. The mutt lazes on the step. It leaves its tongue out to soak up the sun and dry out like a slice of smoked ham. It pants, pads of paws pressed on the pathway. It wants to devour the spaghetti on the garden table. Pigs wallow in the muck, a bath of dirt, cool splashing. It hangs out the sides of tiny mouths, eyes watch the tip wriggle, licks a snout or two. Loose, lazy, avoid the barbed wire, the gorse bushes, the prickly nettles with their surprising sting. And this poem is called Twist. 6 slippery snails slid slowly sleeward. Say it quickly, or gently, it won't ever be right. Mangled words exit the folds of the body's verges. The book being held has been crumpled by spilt water, making into soggy, indecipherable flaps. Yuck. A snail too sits in the mouth, without a shell, getting stuck within the twists and letters which end up the same. It slides downwards and outwards and backwards and forwards, kinks of an organ. Come, come, stay calm, no need for alarm, it only hums, it doesn't alarm. Near an ear, a near a ear, a nearly eerie ear. Shut up the shutters and sit in the shop. The seashells had all been sold on the seashore.
Hi, my name is Nina Huntz. I'm a German-American writer and poet. Tonight, I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Under Days, an experimental recitation of Western Germany's coal industry. This project is mainly about time and place and language, through the description of the ground and the people on it, and sometimes within it. But it's also about layers and fractures, and how history and memory develop in our minds, but also how they fail us. The section I'm about to read is set in a graveyard behind my family house and explores the local genre of poetry that I'll be translating for you tonight into English. This chapter is mostly about lungs, its structures, and its function. And there's a politics to breathing and ventilation that has, since writing this chapter, shifted to the forefront of our awareness. And I'd like you all to reflect a little on your own bodies, in particular your respiratory systems, as I read this. There's a row of blackberry bushes that seem to grow better here than elsewhere, by the roads, our backyards, or neighbors. And the grass too, greener, and the spruces, the pine trees. The tall evergreens with bark thick and scaly, flaky, and needled with adult leaves giving greenness to the forest. The trees, the pines, grow tallest here, so tall we can no longer see their cones, those tiny woody conifers from where we are looking here on the surface. Here, where the dense bulging roots disrupt pathways, the aging asphalt, and even the gravestones. A different kind of tunneling is enacted here, digging into the space where soil is treasured and trees grow taller to produce more oxygen, atmospheric, microscopic. They seem to produce more air molecules here to offset all the mining, to produce the process of photosynthesis, symbiotic in cemetery stillness. We've always used the land, what makes this, our cemetery, so different, sacred, never treasuring the soil better than at a funeral, waiting decay, death, and the breathing. There's a poetry to breathing, the rhythm of each line, like the pulse of a heartbeat pacing each poem, the rhythm, like a hymn, controlled inhales and exhales, unconscious lungfuls made to be controlled. When we read poetry, we plan our breath accordingly, like the pause at the end of a line. Even when not spoken aloud, our speed is set by lungs. This is biology. This is the cadence of breathing that makes a text a poem, with each poem needing silence, space, and fresh air between words, letters, the punctuation of a single speck, a dot that is also a circle, a cycle. Like the gasp of a miner, a mouth ajar, art too needs space for the beige paper to breathe between the lines and charcoal smudges. Here, we are never quite sure if where we are standing is sturdy. Sleeping bombs still resting with our ancestors, and mining veins traveling far past the city limits. The oldest gravestones are, with time tilted, like the crooked gravestone of Ludwig Kessing, carved with letters spelling Bergmann, Dichter, on the old rock taken out from under him. It is June, July in 2019, and my mother asked me if I had seen it. The grave the grave of a miner, the grave of a poet, not far from my father's. The benefit of living by a graveyard is that time doesn't really matter, at least to these neighbors. So we can always skip time simply with an etching. The year is 1882, and Kessing's father, a coal miner, has just passed away. Kessing is 13, but as he is the oldest of three, he must now take to the mountain, the hills underground. With dusty lungs and worn hands, Kessing begins to provide for his siblings, far away from his schooling. What a change of perspective. The year is 1900 and more familiar now with the underground mountains of Essen. Ludwig Kessing self-publishes a miner's hymn book called Im Reich der Kohle, his return to writing. His efforts are kept local but treasured all the same because here we know the importance of breathing in the stuffy tunnels of North Rhine-Westphalen. After this book comes more, many of them filled with poems continuing to fill lungs of weary miners with Kessing's addition to the region's Bergarbeiterlyrik, also known as Bergarbeiterdichtung. This is a genre of poetry most popular in Germany during the early 1900s. Like the Bergmannssprache, it's trade-based and of the Ruhrgebiet, more specifically of the land. These poems by miners depict their everyday lives with a profound loyalty to their efforts, despite their struggles. They offer a particular kind of historical documentation, segments, little crumbs of a record unorthodox. They are another artifact, a version of Cole's story. The poem Im Bergwerk from his book Auf zum Licht demonstrates how lyrical such poems can be even a century later, despite evading metaphors, deep symbolism, and all the cliches. What they offer instead is longevity and directness, paced in a way that allows their blue-collar labor to seem unending and evading with self-actualized importance. Das ist ein ständig Kästen zum Grabe ohne Ruhe. Es rollen reiche Lasten den golden Zielen zu. It is a constant rushing to grave without much rest. There are rich masses rolling towards one's golden quest. The rhythm is repetitive and prescribed, often standardized, but the message is of a community, a collective with a shared goal. Individual experiences, or traumas, are traded for more general terms. And words like ringen, the act of wrestling, a noun of the verb to struggle, keep appearing, somehow more favorable for its universal breadth. In a language where there seems to be a word for nearly everything, this generalization is striking. Das ist ein hartes Ringen im Grund in langer Schicht, wenn wir die Schätze bringen hinan zu Tageslicht. This is a rough wrestling in grounds of long plight. We all are doing the bringing of treasure to the light. The lack of individual experience and specific troubles allow the poem to unify the workers with their shared spirit instead of dividing them with individual hardships and loss. Partly because the hardships were never singular to begin with and never quite stop. As the Bergarbeiter lyrics are mostly written in the present tense, the texts continue to have a certain timelessness in contrast to the ever-changing mechanics of re-engineering the planet. The tense makes it seem like these poems are our own memories, the actions and labors continuing almost as if it were still happening, the digging ongoing, despite changes in mining laws and the ending of a region's sole trade. For these reasons, the poems, hymns, calls are still sung, traveling from bells and lungs in waves of air around Essen. Like when the city bell strikes at the hour and the hymn begins with the bell ringing of an old miner's tune. The songs live on long past their mention in football stadiums and crowded choir halls, central streets of Essen, surpassing even the industry and the lives it's taken. It is difficult to imagine him as part of them, the miners. Him, my great-grandfather. It is difficult to imagine him at all, rarely seen in pictures. All I see of him now is dust particles and vapors, not even as ash. Instead, his face is dark, gritty, and gray, sometimes vermilion. For me, he is only fine coal, powdered, the microscopic dust of alkaline asbestos, nickel, arsenic, chloromethyl ether, all these substances that linger until cancer. Lung cancer, his cancer, lungs exposed to coal dust build little walls around collagen networks found in the upper regions of the lungs. And these dusts layer until masses of dense fibrosis develop little orbs of black, beginning to speckle on human tissue until these clusters merge and become one, until the lungs become black like the coal itself, hard and inky, like the ground, dense and concentrated. This is what happened to my great-grandfather's lungs until they found their way back to the ground, this time a cemetery. A man somehow figureless compared to an industry known for making shapes, deep tunnels. I am writing this now because I don't want the same thing to happen to my father, the being forgotten. I fill his space with words so we never stop speaking of him, reading of him, of his present, so that his presence still passes through our lungs as we speak, breathe, read. I'm writing these layers until I feel he, my father, is the center of my own earth, deep down, but important. Another writing without fixed time.
Oops, hang on a second. My name is Harry Welch, and I'm a writer currently based in London, but I'm reading this evening from Leicestershire. During the course, I've been writing about bodies, the way they function or not, clothing, materials, and the spaces we inhabit. I wrote a text surrounding the Millennium Dome and the giant body sculptures within it for our collaborative class publication, NOIT 5, Bodies as in Buildings, which is what I will be reading tonight. This text then prompted me to write my final project titled Chronic on Textures, Illness, and the Endless Scroll, surrounding chronic illness, clothing, and the fragility of health. This evening, I also wanted to say thanks for Henry and Arts at Assembly House for hosting us. This piece is titled How Can You Be More Beautiful on the Inside? And the illustrations are by Maya Magoga, who's a VisCom student at the RCA. The year was 2000, Greenwich Peninsula, the Millennium Dome. SE100DX, an ethylene tetrafluorine tent crafted from material less than 1 millimeter thick, became a utopian world waiting to be discovered by the visiting public. Smooth plastic, expanses of glass, and sculpted metal became human flesh. Grotesque giant arteries pumped blood, and oversized organs in shades of sickening pastel colors breathed. 14 pavilions arranged in a circular formation explored what it meant to be human in the new millennium. This privatized, civic-sponsored space played host to a public body that invited visitors to explore its giant veins, hard, plasticized, and false. A slow-moving, apathetic creature silently eased itself through growing pains into the moist Greenwich wastelands. The dome rose up out of the earth. The structure was erected like a stretched tent, pegged with soaring yellow masts built by expert climbers and clad with a thin membrane crafted from fiberglass. Inside the dome, subtle orange-hued light evocative of a lethargic summer evening glowed over the finance-themed pavilion that played host to more hard cash than you could ever dream of. The moment of construction of the Millennium Dome and the coming years were emblematic of persistent political optimism and a pervading preoccupation with the corporations that were the financial backdrop to the project. Forced references to the natural shaped the physical structure and wider narrative of the dome, insistently anthropomorphized along with the literal body within it. The public explored its cavernous organs. Blood dramatically rushed through vast arteries while models of human brains talked, and videos were projected out of sculpted moving eyeballs. The body exhibit was a vision of a new kind of organism. Hybrid forms, 2 of them, each 7 stories high, built from inorganic materials through the labor and knowledge of smaller, delicate, and clumsy human bodies. These 2 giant and anatomically explicit bodies were sponsored by Boots Pharmacy, a business that revolves around the malfunctions and maintenance of real human bodies. The 2 figures, smooth sculpted and pastel pink, stood intertwined in a loose and languid embrace. Their hands cradled an iridescent ball that contained another small human, new life. The figures breathed, the blood rushed, the eyeballs flickered, but they did not move. The candy-colored surface of their skin was formed of 80,000 tiles of varying shades of flesh, lain as a mosaic and reminiscent of the line-by-line loading of dial-up internet. Pixelated, not quite there. They did not feel illness, sadness, or pain. They were not wearied by playing host to the thousands of people who trawled through their veins that year. These bodies were fit for a new era. At the turn of the millennium, their resin forms were drilled to the ground, paused, rooted over the Greenwich Meridian line. Sticky summer, snaking queues, bright lights, a profusion of sound. We went inside someone's body, she said excitedly from her children's car seat as we left Greenwich Peninsula in the summer of 2000. A real body. The scale didn't concern us. It was obvious to us children that this was a real body because it was working. Isn't that what makes a body real? Its function. We toured and explored it like any other attraction within the dome, a giant breathing form within which little visitors' bodies took in O2 and expelled CO2, a seemingly self-sustaining system. Built at a time when utopian ideals inspired national lottery-funded building projects throughout the British Isles, the Millennium Dome and the body were emblematic of the moment. Exhibition centres built across the country echoed the dome in form and attitude, strange futuristic entities bubbling up from the ground. Money was poured into new and experimental public structures with varying degrees of success. Padded air-filled biomes were built in a reclaimed clay pit in Cornwall, promising a vision of self-sufficiency and control over nature. The system was christened the Eden Project. The human body is a delicately balanced system that any small disturbance can disrupt. What does it mean when our bodies fail? Despite the many products devised to improve every inch of us, bones break, cells divide or multiply in ways that they shouldn't. Mitochondrial function lowers. Nerves don't send signals in the ways that they should. The body is not obedient. The body is autonomous. It can attack itself. The immune system can't recognize the difference between invading infections and its own cells, and occasionally it attacks both. Yet its skin can somehow be unmarked by this internal conflict. The bodies that flooded the cardiovascular system of the Boots-sponsored giants were real, but were they fit for a new millennium? The skin is smooth and cold, and yet yours is a real body. Sometimes it may not feel like it, as it is a confabulation of inputs and outputs, results, numbers, positives and negatives, and a balance of an internal environment. The skin is a barrier to the outside world, a continuous surface deflecting and supposedly protecting the body. A body that is compromised by the situation it lives within. Restrictions, rules, and regulations are placed upon it. What does the body look like under neoliberalism? Along the shelves of Boots Pharmacy, there are products for every function and every part of us. Our fragmented selves must function at an optimum level in an era obsessed with self-improvement. There is no end to the modifications we can make to our own forms. So what does it mean to be human in a time more disembodied than ever before, when technology can outsmart us and we can develop our bodies beyond recognition? We become increasingly separate from, outside of, our own bodies. Then there is the spectacular giant body. Walk through it and discover what makes you tick, with a trip through inner space. Find the way to your own heart. How can you be more beautiful on the inside? 20 years on, and the Millennium Dome is looked back on as a failure, a hyper-optimistic vision that never materialized. In the late 1990s, when the dome was conceptualized and built, disembodiment was still a distant tech dream. Currently, disembodiment is becoming part of our everyday life, where avatars, AI, smart tech, and other digital developments are engulfing and abstracting the line between technology and our own flesh and bone. In tandem with this, our lives are becoming more and more influenced by corporations, and our bodies are becoming increasingly policed by them, problematizing the boundaries between the body and the world outside. After the Millennium Dome closed its doors and the two giants were disassembled, their one colossal heart went up for auction alongside outsized resin set dressings that were never sold. The parts of the deconstructed bodies were used for land infill, disregarded and forgotten. The dome has since been rechristened as the O2 Arena, housing up to 20,000 ticket-paying customers for a day or an evening at a time. A corporate capitalist venue, glossy plasticized palm trees line the avenues beyond its many entrances. Neon lighting and Americana-style buildings flank fictitious boulevards. Bodies among bodies move in the space. Bodies are scanned and checked prior to entry, searched and ticketed. Bodies breathe in O2 and expel CO2 in perfect equilibrium in an entirely constructed world.
Hi, I'm Rose, and I'm a writer based in Norwich. I'm from Norwich originally. Thank you to Harry, and thank you to Esme and Nina for joining me, and Henry for inviting us to read. Rather than reading from my thesis, I am reading something I wrote in response to the process of writing it, which is now its own thing entirely, and my contribution to a new anthology of nature writing from East Anglia, titled Fieldwork and edited by Sarah Lowndes. The act of return to these flatlands last year to write this personal, intimate thing was at once insular and limitless. A sure path in compass strikes and my material about women and the body and femininity. But it also felt like getting lost in ideas and words and in my solitude. And as such, this body of land and spaces at its edges, that breath became another kind of obsession. This text assumes things shifting and ungraspable in air and wavelengths and light, forever paling to and rising to pink. As for nature, so for women. Oh, sorry. But now she's conspicuous among Lydian women, as sometimes at sunset, the rosy-fingered moon surpasses all the stars, and her light stretches over salt sea equally and flower-deep fields. Sappho, translated by Anne Carson. I came back to this place, another salt sea and flower-deep fields, to write about us, or the me that has assumed you and her and them before, and the skies are stained pink, and the air is pink, and the wall is pink, and the water is pink, nascent, born from union of floating white, derobed blue, and fervent red, that dares to reach out and touch, flint church, glass, wheat chaff. Colour is wavelengths, or more precisely, colour is stunted or long or penetrating lengths of light that we see or we don't see, as blue, violet, red, orange, each one ascertaining their own lifespan, like the flesh line on the palm of your hand. Blue light is short, it scatters like fractured artillery, collapses into mauve, violet, while red spectral purity finds its path and spreads, as if a flower like blood blots on a page. It is autumn, it is winter. In the east, the air along the path that the sunlight seeks is drier and cleaner, heaved in and out over the torn cliff edge and fertile land, flat and broad and limitless, so that a low sun casts its rays. Red tips commune with aerosol mass of cumulus, cirrus, autocumulus, and projects something like transcendental ecstasy, spreading in saccharin and then drains. I rewatch old TV show credits of a blazing Californian sunset fronted by palm tree cutouts and silhouettes of surfers, montaged with blocks of azul blue sea sky and images of sailing boats and pool houses and brilliant white SUVs. California, here we come, right back where we started from. But here, California faces east and merges with the sand and shingle of Scrapby to the north and Caistron Sea to the south, and the land's edge is puckered with off-white caravans, so that the pink is underscored by a shoal, a field, plastic. While inland, in this quiet room, fabric walls, flint rock vista, it spreads silvery over the roofs and stone crenellations, reaches a dawn peach to rose, and later draws down into mauve, pales in lilac. The moon is like silver. Of wavelengths and meaning and paper horizons, Atal Adnan writes, working for years in this direction led me to the suspicion that our mental world is an ongoing translation, that perception is a translating of the object of that perception, and that any thought that we may think to be primordial, spontaneous, is already an interpretation of something which precedes it, and may even be of another nature, another stuff than thinking itself, a wavelength, an it, which remains unknown, a translation of this it by an active filtering function we call the mind. I translate these wavelengths, that spectral air, into pink, and worry that she is a kind of osmosis of the past in this assassination, born of chaos. I watch her creep, rose, vermilion, blush, marking the breaking of day and coming of night, the copper slant of autumn, the golden renewal of Gregorian revolutions. But she chooses her moments, all fleetingness. This mute grey morning is less a spoke than a reminder that she is not fecund flesh flake, nor hardened earth, mother earth, stagnant bog, bosom of the home, but a rippling shadow, waning light, ungraspable shapeshifter, changing her clothes, all fickleness and layers. My eyes adjust and I gulp her in, sugar high. Rosy-fingered, Anne Carson writes, is used habitually by Homer to designate the red look of dawn, but Sappho inverts it. It is the moon that casts that redness. I think Sappho means to be startling, but I don't know how startling, when she moves the epithet to a nocturnal sky. I imagine thorny skin like a flesh-hued turret whips in the clouds, or touching the serrated ridge of mountains in dark mesa with pink sky, 1930, time of day indeterminate. This painting is another kind of inversion, or perhaps a diversion. Georgia O'Keeffe makes the valley and clefts, the material at the centre of the painting, shifting pink, the looming mountain ridge, a pitched grey, and the sky, the space, an aerated pink-coated white, as if the sun is retracting all the colour in those final throes of twilight. But it is O'Keeffe's strokes, Sappho's marks, those unknowable wavelengths that do the work. And then the pink pales out over the sea and a huge full moon cut by electric cables, and I write, swollen and buoyant egg of silkened white sealed in an anachronistic pink, and mauve tails seeping into the line of blackened earth. There is a moment in Claire Denis's surreal masterpiece, High Life, 2018, set in space, where the viewer seems to enter the inseminated stomach of a girl, and the camera floats through her fleshy galactic cosmos, a misty place that spreads near infinitely to a darkness, a non-horizon. Stars puncture cellular layers of contoured air at points deepening to neon holes, and we are forced to reconcile an intimate experience with an external space, a violated womb, a site of worlding. From a becoming to an undoing, Annie Dillard recalls the sky over her beloved Tinker Creek after a shattered star. A rosy, complex light fills my kitchen at the end of these lengthening June days. From an explosion on a nearby star 8 minutes ago, the light zips through space, particle wave strikes the planet, angles on the continent, and filters through a mesh of land dust, clay bits, sod bits, tiny wind-borne insects, bacteria, shreds of wing and leg, gravel dust, grits of carbon, and dried cells of grass, bark and leaves. Reddened, the light inclines into this valley over the green western mountains. It sifts between pine needles on northern slopes and through all the mountain blackjack oak and hoar, whose leaves are unclenching one by one and making an intricate toothed and lobed haze. Her pink sky is an active disillusion, inclining, sifting through pine needles, haze making. I write, I wonder about the potential of nothingness to start again. Hours pass, or they don't, and Dillard stops on a long road trip, asphalt blinded, for styrofoam coffee. My mind has been a blank slab of black asphalt for hours, but that doesn't stop the sun's wild wheel. I set my coffee beside me on the curb. I smell loam on the wind. I pat the puppy. I watch the mountain. The ridges, bosses and hummocks sprout bulging from its side. The whole mountain looms miles closer. The light warms and reddens. The bare forest folds and pleats itself like living protoplasm before my eyes. Like a running chart, a wildly squalling ocelot on the present moment. The air cools. The puppy's skin is hot. I am more alive than all the world. I realize that to realize is to both awaken to and make of. At one of Colette's fictitious Parisian parties, the light from the setting sun touched the curtains, shone through the drawing room from end to end, and Irene's friends cried out in admiration. It's like fairyland. The sky's going pink. One of them was more honest, and as she took in with one glance the Seine, the old drawing room extended by a rustic dining table, the purple and silver curtains, the orange teacups and wood fire. There's no justice in the world, she murmured vindictively. Realizations can be dazzling, that there is no justice in the world, that she is more alive than all the world, that she is violated. But the reverse is also true, each pink sky near transformational. 10th of December 2019, 4:34 a.m. is too wild, too intensely layered to elude some sort of meaning. Something broke and something opened, Dillard says, of the creek at sunset. I filled up like a new wineskin. I breathed in air like light. I saw a light like water. Hours pass, or they don't. I wake in her layers, brass sun, pink sky, fire horizon. Move with her, let her cloak me in her rose-coated arms and release me and dissolve. And I crouch by the window, solitary and in the world, looking out towards our future. Yeah, so we're all from this year's graduate class of 2020 from the MA Writing programme, and in fact we're kind of in the throes of our degree show, virtual degree show, and tomorrow evening Nina, Harry and I are going to be in conversation with Tai Shani for RCA, again talking about writing the body, which is obviously very relevant to Ty's practice as well. So I think Henry's going to share information about how you can tune into that. And I think Esme, you've got an event coming up too.
It's already, so it was on Tuesday, so it was a panel discussion with Sally O'Reilly. It was me, Yuan Zhao and Fiona Glenn. And we were all talking about the idea of being an obsessed writer and using that as methodology. So yeah, you can go and watch that on the Twitch channel as well, as a pre-recorded video. So yeah.
Oh yes. Also, the piece I read today was from Fieldwork, which is an anthology of new nature writing from East Anglia. It just came out like last week. It's published by UEA and edited by Sarah Lowndes, who's also based in Norfolk, and it's available to buy. And there's lots of really great writers in there, and yeah, it's an interesting collection. Yeah. Right.
We should probably also mention, actually, if we're saying about the Twitch for RCA Writing, the Twitch channel, there will also be like a series of events over the next week and archived previous events from last week from our whole writing class on a series of topics. So yeah, the link will be there as well to have a look at the already archived events and the upcoming events as well.
Great, thank you. Don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, we're waving back. Oh.
My audio wasn't coming through. Jonathan's just pointed out that everyone else's was. So apologies for that. I'd just said that if anyone had any questions, then do post them in the comments. I just read the outro that I'd put as well. Yeah, Jonathan's just saying it's had muted, but that's on a 20-second delay. Thank you, Jonathan, for pointing that out. Thank you for everyone who read tonight. If anyone has any comments or questions, yeah, do post them in the chat. There's the links and information of each of the people who spoke tonight in the description below this video. If you'd like to talk a bit more, then strange saying it again. We just started this conversation, but strange working out what I've said when I was muted. Apologies for that, guys. Nikki Stainton saying thanks all, that was really good.
Thanks, Mum.
Hi.
But yeah, I think you've got the information about the events coming up, Henry, right?
Yeah, I think everyone else said them. So whilst I was muted, I said there's the Twitch link for tomorrow night. Is it at 7:30?
Yeah.
Which is Rose and Nina and Harry doing the event. I think Esme's not on that one. Yeah, and with Ty Shani. And it's also on the link of the programme at the bottom of the page. And there's also the link to the fieldwork anthology that Rose read from. Jonathan's just said, does anything not constitute a body?
Yeah, well, that's... What was that? Does anything not constitute a body?
I thought it was kind of interesting, like listening to you, Esme, reading your poems, how like how rubbery and not material, but like textural they were. And I was thinking a lot how you were describing the human body by what it's not, kind of, and like using these, like the rubber boots and the cotton ball clouds. So I think, in a way, we have limited. I mean, I think we're all very broad. We're all very broadly about what is a body and systems and structures. And for me, like I know I draw a lot of parallels with like the mining industry and what happens in the land with what happens within our own body. So I think we're all very like liberal about what is and isn't a body. But I did kind of think that was something interesting, like a very useful tactic that Esme was doing in some of her poems about, writing about the tongue, but not necessarily like always about the tongue, but also, the airplane, and in a way, bring attention to it by.
But also the kind of like personal and very public nature of bodies, how they're personal but also politicized, I think is quite interesting, and I think all of our work tries to bridge that gap or kind of articulate that, the crossover, the point where they meet, and sometimes bodies are the prism through which we explore those things more broadly. But yeah, I mean, Johnny's right. I think we all started off thinking of the body quite literally, right? And then as we sort of decided on the text, we realised how far they kind of travel, and also how they're interested in the space around bodies rather than the body. So the air, the respiratory, like the lungs. What about the spaces that aren't the stuff?
That's what, something which I really focused on was this idea of, public and private space, and also having this part of your body which you can which can thrust or protrude out of your body into this new space, which is something I found really, really interesting. Yeah. So yeah, definitely something to do with public and private, and also stretching beyond the body. And what does that mean in like a physical but also a metaphorical sense? And writing about that and kind of exploring that. I found that really interesting.
And I think it's also how you were saying, Rose, about how bodies become politicised, but also this kind of porousness or porous nature of the body, and therefore the body in public space or private space, and what does that mean, and what effects does that produce on the body, like literally and not quite so literally.
Yeah. And also interesting how all of our texts probably have evolved or would evolve even since like submission in March, is that things have happened that are like our kind of perception or our relationship with the body is like an ever-changing thing. It's not static, and what is going on out there politically or broadly has an impact.
Yeah, I think right now in particular it's such an like important time, because we're like, it sounds so simple, but like so many of us are like realizing that society is someone's reality, and like that's the kind of space that we have to move in, and that there are all these like walls or barriers, you know, in our environment that are you know, like the same sections of our own body, like how like our respiratory system, but also like the blood, and how these are all kind of, yeah, I'm being more and more aware of like all these kind of, not the fractures, but like the segmentation, and how we're like building certain walls, literally, and figuratively, and yeah, I think, yeah, it's like an important paradigm shift to be having and to think about as writers, and to continue like throughout the rest of our careers.
Yeah. Any more questions?
No more in the chat, and hopefully it's not echoing now. My fault on the audio slip up there. Should we round up? Is that? Yeah. Yeah. That's sorry. I should just say that there's the upcoming events. We have just need to get the dates. So terrible organising today. We've got Sarah Downs in the New Mexico desert, and then we've got the next international poetry reading, followed by Ovenby, that Jonathan will be able to confirm soon, and then the second one in September is with Victoria Mitchell, Kyle Foster and Kimberly Foster. Thank you for bearing with us tonight, and for me at the end, and thank you to Rose, Nina, Esme and Harry again. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Cheers.